You know, an evangelical cultist that followed Aimee Semple McPherson in the 1920s, I think that had an impact on modern day U.S. But today we're going to talk mostly about the strange disappearance and alleged kidnapping of Aimee, and actually a TV movie, which was probably the best performance by Faye Dunaway and Bette Davis in years, even though they didn't get along on set. It's called The Disappearance of Aimee. Now, this 76 American made-for-TV biographical drama was directed by Anthony Harvey and starred Faye Dunaway as the Aimee Semple McPherson. Over-the-top performance where Bette Davis said she was one of the most unprofessional people she's ever worked with. Of course, co-starred Bette Davis, the underrated James Slohan, and of course, a young James Woods. The film originally premiered as a presentation of Hallmark Hall of Fame on NBC on November 1776, and a lot of people believe she won the Oscar for Network, not only for this, but it was in their mind because of this performance and Network. That's my theory, and I'm sticking to it. Now, based on true events, the film attempts to investigate the mysterious disappearance of Aimee Semple McPherson in 26 and the court case that followed her safe return after she was missing for 4 weeks. Under law at the time, you could go to jail for faking your own kidnapping. Now, we're going to get into aspects of the case. The movie's excellent. You have to watch from start to finish. Now, it's 100 minutes, but it comes across like almost like a miniseries. But Bette Davis, in her memoir This and That, published by Berkeley in 87, she recounted several anecdotes about working on the disappearance of Aimee, among them that her co-star Faye Dunaway was one of the most unprofessional people she had ever worked with. Davis stated that Dunaway would show up hours late, not knowing her lines and being generally difficult. For one of the scenes in the air-conditioned tabernacle, over 1,800 unpaid extras, locals who had been promised a box lunch and a chance to be in the movie, were left for hours awaiting Dunaway's arrival. When they finally began leaving, Davis rushed to the pulpit and began singing I've Written a Letter to Daddy, a song from her widely popular 62 film Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. Hearing her, many returned to their seats in the pews. Ironically, Dunaway would portray Davis's heyday peer and rival Joan Crawford in the 81 cult classic film Mummy Dearest. Now, the movie itself, again, it's riveting from start to finish because you don't know where the lies and fake begins and where the truth ends or starts. It's pretty bizarre. And James Woods is very chilling in this movie as a very serious young investigator. But Bette Davis' performance, she's basically kind of compensating for Faye Dunaway's flighty acting in the show. Now, getting to the kidnapping, Aimee Semple McPherson at the time was one of the biggest evangelists of her area, and there was a frenzy over her events. She would get thousands and thousands. Now, this also caused a frenzy when she disappeared and changed her life and career. After disappearing in May 26, she reappeared in Mexico 5 weeks later, stating she had been held for ransom in a desert shack, allegedly after a short tenure swimming in local waters. Subsequent grand jury inquiries precipitated continued public interest. Now, on May 18, 26, she disappeared from the Ocean Park Beach in Santa Monica, presuming she had drowned. Searchers combed the area. McPherson sightings were reported around the country, often many miles apart. The temple received calls and letters, her temple, claiming knowledge of McPherson, including ransom demands. After weeks of unpromising leads, Mildred Kennedy believed her daughter to be dead and stated so publicly. After the temple's memorial service, 3 days later on June 23rd, Kennedy received a phone call from Douglas, Arizona. McPherson was alive in a Douglas hospital and relating her story to officials. Now, how it's played out in the movie, Bette Davis's character, Mrs. Kennedy, is a very straightforward lady, so when she gets the news, she doesn't overplay it, but it leaves it in the mind of the public that maybe she was involved. But there's later scenes where she's confronting her daughter, saying, tell me exactly what went on. Now, that's still speculation. McPherson said at the beach she had been approached by a couple who wanted her to pray over the sick child. After walking with them to their car, she was shoved inside. A cloth laced with chloroform was held against her face, allegedly causing her to pass out, she said. Eventually, she was moved to a shack in the Mexican desert. When the captors were away, McPherson escaped out a window and traveled through the desert for 11 to 17 hours and an estimated 17 to 20 miles. Now, as it started out, she reached Agua Prieta, Sonora, a Mexican border town, at around 1 a.m. Collapsing near a house, the evangelist was taken by locals to adjacent Douglas. Her return to LA was greeted by, get this, 30,000 to 50,000 people, a greater turnout than President Woodrow Wilson's 1919 visit to Los Angeles, because her followers were throughout western part of the states. They were huge. Now, LA prosecutors had very varying theories why she disappeared, among them a publicity stunt, and finally contended that McPherson ran off with a former employee, Kenneth Ormiston, staying with him in a California resort town cottage he had rented. After leaving the cottage at the end of May, the pair traveled for the next 3 weeks and remained hidden. Around June 22nd, Ormiston drove McPherson to Mexico, dropping her off 3 miles outside of nearby Agua Prieta, where she walked the remaining distance. In contrast, McPherson consistently maintained her kidnapping story, and defense witnesses corroborated her assertions. Much of the evidence asserted against McPherson came from reporters who passed it on to police. The bulk of the investigation against McPherson was funded by LA area newspapers at an estimated amount of $500,000. Now, the secrecy of California's grand jury proceedings was ignored by both sides as the LA prosecution passed new developments to the press, while the evangelist used her radio station to broadcast her side of the story. Now, on November 3rd, the case was moved to a jury trial set for January 27, charging McPherson, her mother, and other defendants with criminal conspiracy, perjury, and obstruction of justice. If convicted, McPherson would get 42 years maximum in jail. However, the prosecution case developed credibility issues. Witnesses changed testimonies, and evidence often appeared to have suspicious origins, or was mishandled and lost in custody. On January 2nd of 28, Ormiston identified another woman as the companion who stayed with him at the cottage. All charges against McPherson and associated parties were dropped for the lack of evidence on January 10th. However, months of unfavorable news reports produced enduring public belief in McPherson's wrongdoing, but not in the faithful. Now, there was allegations of love affairs directed against McPherson started during the 26 kidnapping trial. Suspected lover generally denied involvement. Alarmed by her style of dress and involvement with Hollywood, a Temple official hired detectives in 29 to shadow McPherson. Detectives found no evidence of affairs. After McPherson's death, unsubstantiated allegations of affairs continue to emerge, including with Canadian journalist Gordon Sinclair and comedian Milton Berle. Berle asserted that he met McPherson in L.A., where both were doing a charity show. Another book by Berle, published during McPherson's life, did not claim an affair. Did that impact what was going on? But after the kidnapping, McPherson remained nationally famous and continued her ministry, but it fell upon press favor. The media, which once dubbed her a miracle worker, focused on disturbances in her household, including difficulties with her mother. Now, despite this, up to 10% of the population in LA held membership in the McPherson Temple, and movie studios competed to offer their contracts. Believing that film had the potential to transform Christianity, McPherson explored Hollywood culture and appeared in newsreels alongside Mary Pickford, Francis Perkins, and Franklin D. Roosevelt. And you could do tons of podcasts on McPherson, but it was the first, what they call, Trumpite cult of its era, because she had nothing but the Bible to stand behind. But at the time, after the First World War, people were looking for faith. In that case, it worked. And for many, she was very charismatic. And the televangelists on TV we saw from the 1940s onward, including Warren Roberts, Rex Hubbard, Jimmy Swaggart, Aimee Semple McPherson. But why fake your own kidnapping? That's the question. What is that going to... She already had her followers in the palm of her hand, so it doesn't make any sense. But if you watch the movie, Bette Davis chews up scenery with Faye Dunaway. And there's a certain line, he said, "Don't lie to me, missy." Bette Davis in that movie more than any Bette Davis movie she did after, whatever happened to Baby Jane. Great performance. She should have won every award for that. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you like what we're doing here with our Vintage Movie Podcast, let us know what you like, comment, subscribe, or share. Bye.